I got it.
Okay.
And I'm very focused, so let me be focused.
You go. You go do your thing.
Welcome. I call to order the policy session on June 29, 2022. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Smith. There's only one policy session today, and that is the new county courthouse, public-private partnership, approval or not. Chair Smith has agreed to have a 90-minute session today. That's longer than we normally have, yet we'll take as much or as short as time as you need to make a decision. You do need to make a decision today, Commissioners. This is a decision point. After over 60 years of prior Board of Commissioners discussing this topic, today you have a decision point to make, either to move forward with a public-private partnership approach or to pause and to try another approach. I do want to quickly recognize we have several elected officials in the room, beyond the Commissioners, our District Attorney, John Wentworth, of course, and many, many judges. And so I'm going to ask you, judges, would you just please stand real quick so we may recognize you, judges here in the room. Thank you all so much for being here today. Much appreciated. Gary Barth is the Courthouse Project Manager. Gary, if you would kick it off, and then we have a short video to show you, I believe, at the start. Go ahead.
Correct. I don't see the light. Is this on?
Yes.
Old habits. Good morning, Commissioners. This is a monumental day, a milestone in this project. I think I'd like to kick it off first with just a video, if Tony has it available there to load up. And this is the 3D virtual video of the building that we have designed and are ready to begin constructing, should you approve, moving forward. I think there's a little audio that might go with it, but perhaps not. Okay. I can narrate. So this is obviously coming in from east to west. Now we're swinging around the south side where the visitor parking will be. What you're viewing there on the back side is secure judges parking. One of the things we did is daylighted the judges parking from below grade to above grade to keep the cost down. This is the new Sally Port and supply distribution area with good circulation of the Sally Port in and out separate exits. This is swinging back around to the south side over towards the PSB corner. And you see the kind of the Ring of Honor has kind of been repositioned a bit towards the entrance of the courthouse. Structural mass timber, but it's mostly just in this entryway. This building is predominantly concrete and steel due to the cost considerations. Very big open access lobby would allow flow. The building entrance has been offset a bit so that when you enter into the lobby, you've got full view down the Beaver Creek corridor to Mount Hood and into the courtyard. Very good wayfinding, easy to see where you need to be. Two-story public level so you can get up to jury assembly without using elevators should you choose. You can just move straight up the staircase. No longer will juries have to assemble down the street and then go out in inclement weather and walk a few blocks and queue up outside waiting to get into the courthouse. This is a typical judicial corridor showing the courtroom chambers and the public waiting area before entering. This again is a typical trial courtroom. We've got courtrooms of various sizes based on needs, and this is all part of our functional space development, working closely with OJD and the case analysis. This building complies with all OCCC, Oregon Courthouse Construction Capital and Improvement Fund facility requirements as well as county facility requirements. We put extensive effort into developing those technical specs and then ensuring compliance with those technical specs when the proposals came in. So the natural daylighting, the positioning of courtrooms was all very intentional to meet technical requirements that we defined. This building will be LEED Gold Plus certified, common to county campus facilities. It will comply with the Oregon Green Technology with 1.5% of the budget allocated towards green technology. which is evidenced in the solar array on the rooftop, as well as a solar array on top of the visitor parking. So that building, in our final proposal, that building is close to being designed. It's designed to the point where costs are guaranteed, and I'll get into that in a moment. So with your approval, we would move quickly into final design and permitting. So just a few opening comments. I'll be brief, but I found it very interesting looking back at the history of courthouses in Clackamas County. And from 1841 to 1884, court was mostly held in rented houses and office buildings downtown. That was even before statehood. There was 2 attempts during that period to build a courthouse. In 1849, a courthouse was built, and it burned down after completion before it was ever occupied. And the next year, they built another one in 1850, and it lasted for 7 years until it burned down. So then they stopped trying. And so it went until 1884, again, just moving around through rented space. In 1884, then, the building was built, a new courthouse that was, quote unquote, built to last 100 years without much addition or repairs. It lasted 52 years before it was determined to be a fire trap and a danger to the public. So that's when the decision was made to tear down the building, built in 1884, and build the current courthouse in 1937. And that's the courthouse that we occupy today. So 4 courthouses in 181 years. They lasted 0 years for the first one, 7 years for the second one, 52 years for the third one, and now we're going on year 86. We just had our 85th birthday in the current courthouse on March 20th of this year. An independent study in 1960, when I was 5, recommended building a new courthouse. Multiple efforts have been undertaken since then with no success. In 2013, the Oregon Legislative Assembly created the Oregon Courthouse Capital Construction and Improvement Fund to provide funding assistance to counties needing to repair or replace their aging suboptimal facilities. That brought the new life into this this replacement need. The board authorized in 2014 for staff to pursue that state funding through the OCCIF. So we've been working on this effort, this specific effort, since 2014, so 8 years now. So it's a significant milestone in that effort to provide you finally with a firm alternative for that courthouse replacement. We just completed a near year-long procurement effort. I want to ensure the board that it was a very exhaustive, comprehensive effort. As you know, we had 8 teams, international teams formed, all submitted statements of qualifications to pursue this project. We narrowed it to 3, ultimately 2, and then subsequently Fingate PCL Progress Partners, also known as FP3, emerged as the apparent successful proposer. I use that term because that's the term we post publicly from our procurement effort, and they're the apparent successful proposer until the board takes action today to either accept or reject that proposal. The project team, and many of them are in the audience today, of internal staff, as well as we have 20-plus folks watching the video that are either part of our consulting team or with state OJD staff, DAS staff, as well as representatives from Fingate are all watching the proceedings today. But I'm up here representing the work of about 50 individuals, intense work that have gone into this, and just want to give thanks. I had an unbelievable team working with me on this. Any questions I can't ask for you today, we do have some folks queued up that may be able to answer, or we can respond back at another time, and I'll defer to the chair on that. So during that process of 8 months, we started with a draft proposal that we refined through the competition. Every time a proposer brought back something saying your technical requirements are asking for X, but if we give you Y, we can give you a better outcome at a lower cost. And we went through 209 of those suggestions, and we accepted 44 of them to revise and modify their technical requirements. That's what we would call value engineering. That's when we daylighted the judge's parking, for example. We eliminated a couple of internal stairwells that we found a workaround on how to handle that flow. So we've taken a number of steps to get this scope the best we can without compromising the need. The need is for 16 courtrooms, no less. We need 14 today, and we need more for the future. So 16 courtrooms is what the state is willing to help fund, and everything else in the building is driven off courtrooms. So with this proposal today, I think there's a key term I would use is certainty. This proposal, the P3 approach, provides you with cost certainty, it provides you with completion certainty, and performance certainty of the building. So the only piece that we haven't locked down yet is the rate of financing, and that will be locked at financial close. But the cost is guaranteed until financial close. The cost will not change from what's been proposed. They've designed this building advanced enough to where they're guaranteeing the price. They've lined up their supply chain. They've lined up their subs. They've got everything in place to execute this contract at this price. The building will get done on time and on budget. And we've got provisions in place that if it does not get done on time, you don't start making payments. But we don't extend the term. The term stays the same. So they get fewer payments over the same term if they don't perform and deliver. So right now the target is finish permitting this year, final design and permitting, working with Oregon City. We've already had pre-application meetings, get the land use done and the conditions of approval. Start turning dirt early in 2023 and ribbon cutting in May of 2025, should you approve this moving forward. We've invested to date about $6.8 million. $2.4 million was in all of our pre-planning efforts from 2014 through about 2020. And then we've incurred another $4 million in this very exhaustive, lengthy procurement process. But from that, we've got almost a complete designed building. If you accept the proposal, the FP3 proposal, as a successful apparent proposer, the next step would be to take this for formal action to a business meeting scheduled currently for June 30th. I think we have a placeholder where you would have an authorizing resolution directing us to execute the contract, the project agreement, and execute a Phase 2 funding agreement with the state for the state contribution. Both those documents are in complete draft form and ready to be submitted.
So Gary, I'll clarify, not tomorrow, June 30th, next week, if the board approves.
Yes.
By
Yeah,
July
yeah,
30th, you mean?
No, my apologies.
Okay.
A week from tomorrow.
July 7th. Next Thursday, if you were to go forward. Thank you.
I'm back on the old 22nd, 30th schedule. We're on the 29th, 7th schedule. Thank you, Gary. And with that, concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Gary. I have a few comments, and I'm sure my commissioners do as well. So county courthouses are a county core service since statehood was formed in 1859. Based on my history going back and reviewing really what core county services are, and but every county is different. If you've seen one county, you've seen one county. Clackamas County is in a position of increased growth. The past several years, we're looking at more increased growth because of many factors of which I won't go into today, but it's probably a certainty. The county courthouse has served us well. Served us very well. However, it has come into a condition that it is deemed no longer safe. And I, for one, am not willing to have the public go into a courthouse or have judges or lawyers serve in an unsafe condition. This has been a very difficult project. We have worked the numbers financially back and forth, upside down, and then and at the last minute, costs were more than we thought, and we said, okay, we need to figure that out. So I'm going to go over some numbers right now. In our budget forecast, commissioners, that we looked at during budget, and you have this, you have the forecast. And then the pink line is the courthouse capital, an additional O&M, and we budgeted for a $13 million payment, which is quite doable, and that payment won't start until we take occupancy in 2025. However, with additional costs that were added in, I said, holy cow, you go find me the money. Obviously, there's a lot of people, you included in the room, went and found some more money, and we have a letter here from Martha Walters, the Chief Justice, and who has said that she will put in her budget to the Legislative Fiscal Office the additional amount to keep this courthouse funding whole. And I understand that's about $80 million more?
60 million more state
60
contribution.
million, the state contribution. Our contribution would be how much? 20?
We,
An additional 20 or 19?
I don't have that split. The total costs will break down about 51% county, 49% state because the
So,
district attorney.
Going off with
Off the
the
300 million.
calculations, I think maybe that I asked for some additional calculation. We had assumed a payment of $13 million. However, with cost overruns, is about an additional $1.3 million a year, which brings our payment to $14.3 million a year, which I think is very doable. From now until when our payments start, we will continue on the process of right-sizing our government. In that, we will determine what are core county services and what are some of the additions that have happened over time because they feel good and other people wanted us to do. And I think governments all across Oregon and really nationally need to have a check on what they're doing, what they're paying for, and really what the citizens demand. In Clackamas County, there's been numerous polls, and there's some people in this office have sponsored those polls, saying that voters believe that public safety, because of their personal safety, the crime rate, the homelessness, the drug addiction, the mental illness, public safety is paramount in what they want to see happen. Plus, we need a new courthouse. I think this commission has been looking at it. Previous commissions, when I was here in 2013, we looked at it, in 14 and 15. Many commissions, and there's a former commissioner sitting here, Ann Leininger, who's now a judge, she looked at it as well. People on this bench have looked at it as well. We've finally come to a place where I think that we can do it. And so with that in mind, I look forward to moving forward with this project. We have Commissioner Savas in the queue. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. I think we all agree that we need a courthouse, and we certainly need a safe place for both all of the employees, the judges, and the public that goes to the courthouse. So we certainly realize the need. So I want to just say that up front so there's no question as to, at least my thoughts and my intention. I do support the courthouse. It's just really a matter of how we pay for it. So, Gary, what the public is seeing, what I'm seeing right now on page 5 of the 242 pages of the packet, it mentions here the capital charge of being $9.8 million, and then a facility management charge of $3.2 million, and another $0.7 for another fee for the capital element of the facility management. And I know that this project is kind of ballooned. It was estimated, I think we first started out to be $170, $180 million, and now it's 313 is now the new number. Is that correct?
The final total cost all in of everything, site improvements, is estimated at 313.
Right,
Correct.
and it's ballooned. And we are in a very high inflationary construction time environment. So I have, and I know, as you know, there's stacks of documents that I couldn't even fit on the dais here, so I just got little portions that I've printed off here and so forth. So I'm struck because I'm not seeing consistency. So when I look at the proposal form 18, it shows the proposed capital charge is $12,424,521 on the proposal form. And then but what it says
That's
here.
a document that was not submitted because that's part of the confidential submissions
Okay,
of the procurement.
so you're saying I can't speak to it?
You can generally speak to it, but the numbers that I put in the staff report are the resulting numbers that the board would be
Okay.
authorizing.
So we got the power, that's my difficulty here. I don't know what we can disclose and can't disclose, but we're making the largest decision this county's ever made in this history, hands down. When we approved the step in May 5th of last year to proceed, I had raised some concerns about maintenance costs and some other costs, which I thought were very high, higher than the norm, far higher than the norm for any of this building, the building next door. Actually, all our buildings combined didn't even equal the maintenance cost that's embedded in this proposal here going forward. So
I can address that for you too, if you'd like, Commissioner.
yeah. And so I don't know where to begin, but what I'm trying to get at least the very minimum right now up front, what is the annual payment?
Right now, the annual payment is
All in?
all
with
in.
with
Right now, the
costs.
annual payment today, with the latest interest rate running the scenario, the payment is $11 million for the capital charge, $3.3 million for the first year facility management charge. That works out to about $13.50 a square foot, which our cost estimators evaluated against all courthouses in the country to get a reasonableness benchmarking. So that came in right at our estimates going into the procurement, and were validated throughout the procurement. And then an average of about $700,000 a year that would go into a capital reserve to replace and repair fixtures within the building as they ended their useful life. So we've got a provision in there too, so that when the building is handed back in 30 years, there's no deferred maintenance. It will have been maintained through normal operations and repairs and replacements as needed on the life cycle. The 3.3 is set. The $700,000 is set. They're both indexed to the CPI. We have a public CPI index that has been locked into the project agreement. So those costs will go up annually at the CPI, but it's projected to be a much lower rate than our current costs go up on facilities management in-house. The $11 million is not fixed yet until we get to financial and commercial close, because it will be fixed, but right now it's pegged to various financial instruments. And as you know, it's a very volatile market out there right now. They're not tied to prime, so if the Fed moves prime, doesn't mean your rate moves, but if Fed moves prime and that has effect on the Treasury and the yield curve and Wall Street and other kinds of pension funds, then that's what we're pegged to and indexed against. And Rebel's got our financial consultants, we've got this pegged so Rebel can run the scenarios at any point in time and tell us what that capital charge is, up until the point it gets fixed. And it would get fixed at financial close. It's like going in and closing a mortgage that is, floating rate until you close the mortgage.
I just want to interject here. We get a fixed interest rate.
Yes, at financial
not
close,
a variable.
once that capital charge is set at financial close, it stays that for the 30 years.
I think that's really important.
The
to
only thing that's
remember.
variable is the operations, maintenance, and repair, which is pegged to the CPI index.
Commissioner Savas, go ahead.
Yeah, so Gary, just getting back, so as you stated on the very early part of your response to my question, the first year was that number. So if I take the 3.3 plus a 0.7, that's 4 million, plus 11, that's 15 million. So what is the projected ramping up of the cost similar to this?
Similar, yeah, and you'll see the capital charge is flat. Once it's
Right.
locked, the capital charge is fixed,
So,
like a fixed
so
mortgage,
really, years forward, that payment goes up.
based on the CPI for the O&M component.
And that CPI is built into this chart.
Correct.
Okay, so I know the first year is the lowest year. So, I mean, we have years here that it's up to $18 million a year.
First year is base year 0, yeah.
Right.
There-
Okay, so let's just say it's 15 million, 15 million times 30 years, that's $450 million. And that's separate from the state's contribution for their short. So this is assuming the state comes in with their share of half the cost plus the 450 we need to come up with over the next 30 years, actually more than 450. So my question is this, or my point is this, in that, in May 5th of last year, we chose to move forward. And the end of May, we had our budget committee meeting and the budget meeting was premised on that, 12 months ago, going forward, where we are today, we would have a sustainable, structurally sound budget, and the cuts would have been made to ramp in and calculate all of the projects we had, including the courthouse. However, this year we didn't do that, which I'm a little bit alarmed by. I mentioned that in budget time. And so what we have today is no financial planning of where those cuts will be made. And I kind of reference I call it the jaws of death, when costs exceed, or projected costs exceed revenues. And that gap right now is at least $15 million. So what I did, colleagues, is that I'm going to pass this down the way here. I printed off in April of this year in our budget committee meeting, we had that spreadsheet for the forecast, which is the big piece of paper.
I think I just showed it.
Yeah, and Chair just held it up. So what I did is I just had staff graph it. So you have a graph, and that graph shows that the red line is above that amount. So that was April, and then, finance staff did their work with financing it, and they subtracted out the projects, and we just got really a sustainable budget, but nothing structurally sound, nothing that incorporated the 5-year going forward. So it gives me more pause than I thought even a year ago, that at least we identify where the cuts would be. So we need to make about $15 to $20 million of cuts. That red line, as you can see, colleagues, is above the green line. The green line's the revenue line. The revenue line is not going to change very much, and that ramps up with inflation, not inflation, but our 3% property tax. So how we fill the gap is what I need to know. And so I think it's the responsible thing to say here, again, the magnitude of this decision is what gets cut. And it's significant cuts. And to put that burden on the administrator or staff to find $20 million worth of cuts gives me a little bit of pause, puts staff and the administrator in an untenable position where the cuts are. If the cuts are mild, they don't impact maybe some of the services or that our constituents out there desperately need, but those cuts are going to be serious, and there's going to be pain in there. And without identifying where the cuts are, I struggle today to support going forward until we identify that, let alone the high inflationary period we're on. We put two other projects on pause because we're going to wait for the market to come down on construction costs. So it seems to me that if we're going to move forward with this one, it's counter to what our strategy was with the other two projects, but the size of this one is so significant that it's really elevated the cost, several $1 million a year payments for 30 years because of the high cost. So my question is to the administrator, I guess, and my colleagues, where are the cuts going to be made and what's going to be compromised? Because if it's public safety, I think I'm going to struggle with that one. We're going to have to lay off staff. That's the only way we can find $20 million of cuts. So I need help with that one.
So, Gary, you are our Chief Budget Officer. We do have a sustainable budget going forward. I think it would be, in my opinion, a budget. And I've served on the largest budgets in the state of Oregon. I was on Ways and Means in the Oregon legislature. This is why we have this forecasting document, to help us on our way between now and the year 2025. We do have plans in place, like I said, in determining what core county services are going forward. And I think that's a decision that this board will be making over time. Gary, you want to address that?
Sure. So our operating budget is sustainable. That is the services and programs we provide today. If we add these special projects, including libraries and the courthouse, then the budget is no longer sustainable. But we talked to you about this. That is where we make reductions to the general fund, strategic reductions we call them, to rebalance so that you can afford this. under your general fund constraints over the next 30 years. Commissioner Savas is correct. There will be approximately $15 million of cuts of the general fund, which is about 10% of the general fund, will have to be reduced over the next 2 fiscal years. And there will be some tough choices you'll have to make. I will make recommendations to you, but it's ultimately your decision where to make that 10% reductions. We've already made about 12% of reductions over the general fund for the last 3 fiscal years. So we've been doing it. And so it is painful, but it can be done, and we will do that again should you choose to go forward today. I do want to say with great respect to the chart Commissioner Savas just forwarded to you, it is missing one important number, and that's the carryover fund balance, which is approximately $40 to $50 million. So therefore, that red spike is not accurate because we're not counting the carryover fund balance, which also is part of the carryover funds, which also includes contingency and reserves.
Correct.
Thank you.
Also, Commissioner Savas, you said we put pause on some projects because of inflation and high cost, but we're going ahead on others. We're going ahead on the projects that have substantial cash match. And 2 of those is the Fair Barn and the Extension Service. And they have acquired funds and have been saving funds. In this case, we have a substantial match from the Oregon legislature, and I think it behooves us to take advantage of that. I see commissioners are in the queue. We're going to go on down the line. Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Barth and our visitors. Thank you for that information this morning. My question to the folks in the audience today, does the plan for this courthouse meet your every need? Can you say that with 100% assurance? Because if there's anyone who finds the plan wanting, we need to know today. Because there's no opportunity in this process for extensive change orders that happen to be very expensive. So I see a positive head nods back there. That's very reassuring to me. Thank you very much. It is unfortunate that we've been faced with higher costs on this project, but I feel that I can support this project you have described to my constituents, and that they will accept that. One of the biggest things I hear in the county today is constituents' concerns for law and order. We know that you have been making do with the old courthouse for many years, but your ability to process cases needs to be sped up. I think every judge here will agree with me. So, also, on the state match portion of this project, the people up here sitting in front of you are going to need your help to make sure we can procure those extra dollars, those extra matching dollars from the state to make this happen. Otherwise, we're going to really be in a pinch. So, Mr. Barth, thank you very much for all your work. And finally, Mr. Barth mentioned when he was 5 years old, somebody had made the comment that they need a new courthouse. And if we delay it any longer, I believe that was probably about 62 years ago, 62 years in the future, would take us to 2084. I'm going to be pretty old by then too, and I won't be able to vote on a courthouse. So I say let's make this happen, but let's all work together to ensure that the numbers come together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. We have 2 other commissioners in the queue, 3, excuse me. But Gary, you have a comment?
Just real quick, I recognize State Representative Mark Meek, who's been very supportive of our project. He's on the line watching on Zoom and wanted to recognize him.
Thank you, Representative Meek, for joining us today. Commissioner Fisher, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I agree so much with what my colleagues are saying. And Commissioner Savas, you are so correct in keeping our focus on a mindful view on how we must keep track of our spending and make sure that the budgets that we pass are sustainable, and continuing to work with our county administrator, who is our budget officer, to assure that we do that. And so I appreciate your voice in making sure that we do that. It is absolutely fundamental to the operation and function of good government. Also fundamental to good government and a required county function is a courthouse. We must have a courthouse that is functional. And when I look at public safety, is a concern that we know that the top concerns are public safety and housing and homelessness. Those are the issues that are on the minds of our constituents. And I'm looking out in the audience at our district attorney, who knows ever so well that, we can have the most robust public safety with officers and patrol cars and body cameras and staffed up. We can have a jail that's completely staffed up with mental health beds, with everything that we need. But if we don't have the capacity within our judicial system to make sure that those cases get before judges and get into our system, or they are delayed, it doesn't work. It is the foundation and the bedrock of our criminal justice and public safety system is our courthouse. So delaying is too risky. I understand that there are concerns and there are risks with increased costs, but delaying is too risky. With this P3 model with Fengate, we have fixed costs, we have certainty of what we will be looking at into the future. With this proposal, we have dedication from our, and we got a letter from Mark Meek. I just saw it this morning with Mark Meek and Rick Lewis, Senator Rick Lewis, who is part of our Clackamas County delegation of the legislature. We have certainty that they will work with us and advocate for Justice Walter's budget to help us get the state match that we need for the increased costs. We have certainty of the timeline and the maintenance for 30 years. Those costs can be significant, but we have that certainty that this building will be managed and maintained for the 30 years that we have this P3 in place. So with just some of those highlights and comments, I would say it would be too risky to delay. We have done tremendous amount of work as a county with our community partners, with our judicial team, and I'm looking forward to voting to approve this today.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
Yes, thank you. And I want to thank Commissioner Savas for being the voice of, of helping us understand the magnitude of this issue. I am going to support it today, but I fully understand that even though in some ways we are reducing risk long-term, we are going to enter into something that will require significant cuts in our general fund budget, and I'm here to tell folks that I will enter into this with full knowledge that that is going to be some of the significant choices that we're going to have to make. So let's please be mindful of that. This is not an easy decision. I believe that we have to move forward with this at this time. I believe that we would lose our match if we don't move there. I've told you my personal story more than once, that I have a daughter who's a prosecutor in Suffolk County in Massachusetts, and I would not want her in that building. I feel that that building, I've called it a death trap more than once, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. It's an unsafe building. It's unstable. I think that a fire there would be a disaster, and I could not. Should anything of that nature happen, and we had the opportunity to to really build something bigger and better that will fit the needs of our public safety system. I don't know how I would feel about my tenure here as a county commissioner. But be aware all that as we move forward with this, we are putting an extreme burden on our administrator and our staff. And my hope is that it doesn't cut deeply into our social service delivery systems, because those are costly. We have a youth houselessness issue. We're working very hard to make sure folks are getting wraparound services for what they need, and we will have to scrape every little bit of our budget to meet this commitment. So I will support this today. I do think there is a risk, but I think that this is a risk that we need to take, and we have minimized the risk as much as possible. So when we have to make these tough budget decisions, I hope all of you will help us get there as partners in our public safety system, because we're going to need your support, we're going to need your help in order to move this project forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schrader. Commissioner Savas, you're up, and then Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, I hadn't really completed my questions.
I thought you had.
No, I did not.
Well, you quit, and so I thought.
No
So
worries,
why
no
don't you
worries.
go ahead and say what you need to
So if
say?
I can go back to Gary and say, Gary, what areas of the budget do you foresee having the cut?
Every department that receives general fund, and it's 90% of them, will be impacted, all of them.
So I know that public safety is a good chunk, more than a majority of our budget, so that would be cuts to public safety as well.
I would be proposing some non-essential services, services that are non-essential, to look at those as well. Commissioner Schrader, you mentioned it very well. Everyone is going to have to contribute to this internally here at this organization.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and I just want to say that the magnitude of this is a huge decision, but I do believe, I really believe we need to move forward at this point in time. We can no longer let people be in a building that is unhealthy and dangerous to their well-being. And it is part of our public safety continuum, which is part of our essential services and duty. And I've weathered tough budgets before as a commissioner, and I believe with the colleagues I'm sitting here with today that we will weather them again, and we will weather them with your expertise, and we will try and minimize any, as much, how can I say this, as much pain as we can. I mean, we will. We'll do it.
Sorry, Commissioner Savas is still going, sorry.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, Gary. So I guess I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess I'm going to have to a little bit. I mean, why did we not really follow through with the budget direction a year ago in getting the pathway, the runway to the budget to get ourselves structurally sound? What challenges did you have that didn't allow you to make those cuts?
The board did not direct me to do that, Commissioner, so let me be clear about that. I told you there's 3 fiscal years to make these reductions, and I made minimal reductions. I recommended $2 million instead of $5 million this current fiscal year, with the rest to happen over the next 2 fiscal years. So if anything, I made $3 million less than I told you verbally I would a year ago. Ultimately, I make a recommendation to you, Commissioners. You approve the budget, not me. And this is the budget I proposed to you, and you approved it. So over the next 2 fiscal years, $15 million needs to be reduced in the general fund. I'm going to recommend we do it in one. Let's do it in one. Why drag it out?
Let's do it.
Do it in 1 fiscal year.
I agree with that.
And I'll work with staff to make recommendations to you. We'll involve you as much as you're willing over the next 6 months to make these plans, and then you'll make the decision next May.
And I would just like to mention that I think that, frankly, this is a reset for the county, looking at what our core services are. And through the years, we have, upon occasion, done things that we have wanted to do, but we're going to have to take a close look at that and really focus on core services. And I think that conversation, under the leadership of our chair and my colleagues, is going to be well underway, and your leadership as well, Gary. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas, do you have any more comments?
Oh, yeah, I do. So I appreciate that, Gary, and I just want to just say, as I said during the budget meeting in May, late May, is that, the board's goal of, under building public trust of good government, by July 1st, 2022, the county's budget will be structurally sound and sustainable, and we didn't achieve that. So my question was then, I don't need an answer because I don't expect one, but my question was, when did the board decide that we were not going to meet this goal? And there was no board decision not to meet the goal. So
I'd like to answer that
Chair-
since
Chair,
you
if I could-
posed, you answered the question, it will not go unanswered. I do believe this is a structurally sound budget, and your accusations to the contrary will not be tolerated during this meeting. Commissioner Savas, you've made it very clear, you're a no on this courthouse. That is fine. However, I believe there are votes to go ahead and pass this. You have said this over and over and over. The answers to your questions are forthcoming, because on every reduction on one side of the ledger to get to a positive on the other side of the ledger, it has to be a vote of this commission at many different policy sessions. So if you want to continue to say some new information, I would be willing to entertain that. However, we have more commissioners that want to make some statements, and I have some specific questions too regarding what's included in this. So if you have something new that you want to present, Commissioner Savas, go ahead.
If I can just continue my train of thought, so I'll just repeat it so I can put everything back so when you were asked that question, when I asked that question during the budget, your response was, it's not structurally sound. And I believe that. And I think the graph here shows that the budget is not structurally sound going forward. It's sustainable, but it's not structurally sound, knowing when you incorporate the projects into that. So the other goal in here is by 2025, the new and existing funding for the county courthouse, the jail, and law enforcement operations will be identified from federal, state, and regional and local funding sources. So that's we got 3 years to do that, but that's a big challenge now, should this decision be made to go forward today, which it appears it will. So I want to make that statement. I also want to clarify that this graph shows that the trends for the revenue and the trends for the cost are real. If there's one-time money of carryover of 40 million or reserves, that's true. But the trends, the jaws of death, if you will, the trends here is what this is designed to display. So my question to Gary, the cost of the 3.3 plus the 0.7 for a total of $4 million a year for the FMC, the facilities maintenance charge, what would be that's fixed, but in year 31, calculating a net present value, what will it actually cost to maintain? What will be the actual dollar amount that the budget will, not the budget, but the county will have to endure after this is done? I'm sure that inflation is going to be significant after 30 years, but what do we think that number would be if we calculate in net present value calculations?
Yeah, I can't really speculate on what the cost of maintaining the building would be in 2055, whatever the rule. But it would be, at the end of this project agreement, you would no longer be contracting with FP3 as the third party to take care of this building. It would come back into the county's portfolio and be taken care of by county facilities like all the other buildings. And they would come to you annually for a budget to take care of the courthouse. And I don't know what that amount would be. I can tell you today they spend about $1.5 million maintaining the existing courthouse, and that increases, I would speculate that's increasing at a greater rate than the CPI index. So if you took that $1.5 million we're spending today on the current courthouse and took that out over 30 years with a higher escalation, that's the comparison to the 300 or the 3.4 million that we have here in regular O&M. And then today, if we have a capital need for any of our facilities, that usually goes in as a separate budget request for a capital repair or replacement. There will likely be additional capital repairs needed in the existing courthouse that would have to come in through the normal budget process. So there's a cost avoidance of moving out of that facility, and it shifts over into this predictable one.
Well, thanks. The other comment I wanted to make was that back in 1997, when I first got on my first budget committee, that we were facing a water treatment plant expansion. We were facing a number of capital requirements with piping for the water district that I served on. And then the recession came in, and we had a devastating recession, and the cost just accelerated, went through the roof, and we couldn't afford to do any of them. We waited for the market to come down, and the bidding market in 2001, 2002 was extremely attractive. We got 3 times as much bang for the buck. So the inflationary cost and the cost of projects has always been cyclical. We know that. So that's why I just caution here is that we're at the top of market. We put pause on the 2 other projects, the libraries. They also have a considerable match as well. They have funds sitting there, so this is not a unique one. But it's just the substantial magnitude of the cost here at the top of market. It seems to be my advice to my colleagues, wise to just hit the pause button and wait, because the pain that we'll suffer, the loss, the jaws of death will literally mean pink slips for a number of people in this county.
Gary Barth, you have
May I
an answer?
respond?
Go ahead.
Quickly, we looked at that very seriously, those escalating factors. We've only had 2 periods of deflation in the last 50 years. Those were in 2009 and 2010 after the financial crisis, where conditions of unemployment and other factors were much more severe than they are today. There's nobody predicting deflation that I can see in any research, and we've looked at McKinsey and Oxford Economics and others. The rate of inflation on commodity prices may flatten, so the rate of increase may go down, but we're not envisioning that even commodities will deflate to lower prices than they are today. That's one factor, but commodities are only, and there's a lot of commodities in this building. There's aluminum, there's steel, there's copper wiring, there's concrete. So each of those commodities are moving on different paradigms and axes. But about 55% of the cost is labor. About 45% is material. Labor costs are almost certainly going to continue rising, but we see that in the markets based on the low unemployment and the high demand. And capital costs. Our consultants told us that the weighted average cost of capital in this project is the best they've seen of a P3 financing structure. It's been moving up because we haven't locked it yet, and rates are volatile right now as the Fed's making moves. But it's still historically a very good financing rate. Financing rates, I think, if folks looking out in the future, I think are going to continue to increase. So even if you got some softening of commodity, you're going to get upward pressure on labor and financing that would likely offset any gains of delay. That's why our recommendation was not to pause, but to move forward with certainty and lock in.
Yeah, well, there's 3 factors I was trying to point out. I think that were in the Y2K, the recession following Y2K. It was recession, the recession itself, the bidding environment, inflation, and inflation, bidding environment, one more. Labor, yeah. So there were some unique circumstances in there, and so the bidding cost, the bidding environment changed dramatically, even though the inflationary cost didn't change very much at that point in time as far as materials. But because of labor, as you said, 45%, that's a big chunk of that, and it was extremely attractive. So hence, the cost of those projects came down, which I think will happen here too.
We looked at the bidding environment as well, and with the Build Back Better and a number of other public infrastructure projects coming on board, there's going to be a lot of investment dollars chasing few resources. So we're seeing that kind of movement in the market as well. On a personal note, I'm an elected official. I serve on a local water board. We just approved a project that was 80% greater than what we had anticipated 3 years prior, but we approved it based on the market conditions.
That's not fun. I have 3 other commissioners in the queue. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Smith. When I had put my light on, I had thought that we were going to be done making our comments, and so I was going to be ready to make a motion. But since I know that you have some more comments
Yeah.
that you want to make, and then Commissioner Schrader's in the queue, so I will, if you could circle back with me,
Yes.
I would be happy to do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, in the last few days, I spent a lot of time thinking about this project. At first, I was considering voting for a pause. The more I read about that and the outlook for the next few years, this report here from the American Contractors Association and other reports indicate that we're looking at continued inflation for the near future anyway. So if we pause, in the intent to try to see prices come down, we run the risk of, in a year or two or three, having the costs actually go up. And in that pause, we potentially lose the match from the state. We potentially lose the public-private partnership from Fengate. And so let's say in 2025, after a 3-year pause, things do look better. We have to start over again with a new public-private partnership or doing this cash up front. So this morning, yesterday, it became evident to me that a pause is not a prudent idea, and that losing what we have and all the work that's happened in this particular plan, this project, cannot be lost. And if it is lost, it won't be regained. So I understand, I share Commissioner Savas's concern about the budget. It's a huge concern for me. It's a Pepto-Bismol thing for me.
Yeah.
But it would also be a Pepto-Bismol thing for me to pause this project. So I'll vote yes to make it go, and then hope for the support of everybody in this room to make it successful.
Thank you, Commissioner Shull. Commissioner Schrader, you're in the queue.
I was going to make a motion, but I'm going to defer to Commissioner.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I move that we accept Fengate PCL Progress Partners as a successful proposer to design, build, partially finance, operate, and maintain the new Clackamas County Courthouse, given that we have received the letter of approval from Chief Justice of the Oregon Judicial Department approving the project as proposed and supporting the county's request for additional OCCCIF funding in the 2023 legislative session. And given that this option provides the greatest amount of certainty in completing the project at a known cost that is $40 million less than the competing proposal with a very attractive cost of capital.
Second.
Commissioner Fisher has made the motion to approve the courthouse project, and I'm not going to repeat that. And Commissioner Schrader has seconded that. Any further discussion? Commissioner Savas.
Yes, Chair, when I put my light on, I didn't, in fact,
So
I
make
didn't-
your points brief, because then I'm going to call for a vote, Commissioner Savas.
Understood. So I guess if the strategy is to, as Mr. Shull stated, to not pause, I guess I just look for a head nod from my colleagues. Are we going to put the libraries back on track then and move forward with them?
We're not in discussion of the libraries today. Your question is out of order. We are in discussion of passing the courthouse or not. Further budget considerations will be made at future policy sessions where we can make decisions at that time.
You know, I think we obviously have a half an hour left.
Well, we do not have a half an hour left, because as Chair, it is my prerogative to call for a vote and move on and end this session, because Commissioner Savas, I have told you we are not going to revisit the same arguments that I do not believe that are applicable today. Tony, please call the poll.
Yes, Madam Chair. Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
No.
Commissioner Shull,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 4-1. Gary Schmidt, any other business that we need to take care of today regarding the courthouse?
No, but to close then, so we will do we'll do a consent agenda item for next Thursday's business meeting where you're going to solidify this decision today and have the agreement ready to go, right? Nate, Gary, next week?
Correct. The procedure is to adopt a board order implementing the decision here today. We'll also have the Phase 2 agreement committing the funding from the state, at least the initial tranche of funding, and that'll be before you on your consent agenda as well.
It'll be on the business meeting consent
Next
agenda?
business meeting consent agenda, yes.
On July 7th?
On July 7th, if that's next Thursday, correct. And we can do a briefing at issues next Tuesday, consistent with other consent agenda
Okay, if that needs
items.
to be done. Gary Barth, if your presence might be needed at issues next Tuesday, I'm not sure what Mr. Boderman's talking about, but you two consult and let us know.
Okay.
Okie dokie. Commissioner Savas.
I just want to quickly state that, again, I support building a new courthouse, but it has not been demonstrated the means in which to pay for it, and which is the reason and the rationale for my no vote. It's simply a thought that a year ago that we would be in a position to identify how we would pay for such a courthouse.
Well, we have identified how we're going to pay for the courthouse, Commissioner Savas, and your comments make me even more determined to prove you wrong. With that in mind, this session is adjourned.